quick disclaimer, this, let's charitably call it a review, will contain spoilers such as environments, new mechanics, plot points, but I will try to stay away from ending spoilers. Let's get started. Do you ever read reviews and start thinking that everyone is talking about a completely different game than the one you're playing? The new God of War is not inherently bad, but how on earth can this be a 9 or 10 out of 10 and Game of the Year candidate? Is this really the best AAA games have to offer? But we are getting ahead of ourselves here. God of War Ragnarök is the story of Kratos' journey through the 9 realms, learning to be a father and his Comspawn's attempt to become a man. And if this sounds familiar, then you are right on the money, since it's the exact same character development as we had in the previous game. Actually, this sequel is the sequelest sequel that ever sequeled, with reused character development, game mechanics and set pieces. It is not always appropriate to compare a game to its previous titles from long ago, but in this case the attention is constantly drawn not only to the previous release but also the original God of War trilogy. No mention of Ascension though. Let's start on a positive note. Presentation. This is where this game shines. It is beautifully created with an insane level of detail. However, God of War has always been about visual spectacles, and here they seem to have been toned down severely compared to the predecessor. Examples are Svartalfheim and Helheim, where we in the first game see the giant temple on the lake and the Bridge of Souls respectively, but when revisiting in Ragnarök, we are treated to mostly linear corridors of the same environments with hardly any impressive view to speak of, at least not anything new. The meeting with the world serpent is reused, but instead of the breathtaking view of the giant lake with the serpent stretching across the mountain ranges, we just see the head in a snowstorm, which does not even come close to the same effect, even if this meeting hadn't been recycled. We also have the battle with Nidhogg, the mother dragons or something, and compared to the dragons in the previous game, this is just an overgrown lizard with a portal ability. Overall, while it is technically bigger than the previous game, everything feels slimmed down significantly. We do see some very impressive spectacles towards the end, and for example with the Guardian of Helheim, Garm, which we will get back to later. Regarding the amount of recycled content, the game even chooses to draw attention to this by saying, let's tell the same stories as last time, or this will unlock the trials. Remember the trials from last time? Let's do them again. Oh, fuck off. There is even a self-ironic notch to the reuse of the troll boss in the previous game, which the game immediately follows by reusing the same crocodile fight again and again, or just reusing another boss from the first game. First step might be admitting that there was a problem, but you also have to do something about it eventually to actually make it count. The overall story is interesting, but besides the character development, which was unchanged from 2018, the story does not have that many plot points throughout the very long playtime. A major problem seems to be the lack of a central goal, and that Kratos is mostly piddling about not knowing what to do, unlike the previous game where we always had a central goal of spreading some broad ashes. An antagonist reveals himself in the second half, but this is the type of god mostly akin to something like Hermes in God of War 3. An enemy Kratos will be strung up and dismembered before breakfast and wearing his shoes to work that same day. But then we dispatch him and go back to piddling about some more, seemingly leading to an unsatisfying ending as in the original God of War 2, or so I thought. At this point the game goes into complete overdrive, shifting into God of War 3 for the last couple of hours with a great climactic fight and satisfying ending. This may be a little too fast though, since the game seems to be tying up loose ends with the speed of an OCD-afflicted squirrel in a shoelace factory. But overall, very satisfying ending, showing a positive retelling of the original trilogy with a lovely redemption arc. On a side note, the heck is up with these out of the blue random or heroic deaths of side characters, like this burger dude? Well, bye. I'm sure whoever he was, someone out there may be sad about this. Anyway, the issue with the bulk of the story is that the plot goals arise on a moment-to-moment basis, and the way these are dragged out just screams of padding. Examples of this would be when we are looking for the Norns. These are the Sisters of Fate from God of War 2, in case you thought we were only recycling the previous game. We're using our wolves to track them across the plains, but we are deliberately sent to 2 dead ends with nothing in them before reaching the goal. Another is when visiting a certain lake. Firstly, the lift isn't working, so we gotta go around and clear it like Midgard's pest controller, and when we get to our needed diving bell, whoops, the crank is broken. Let's spend some time mining minerals so that the dwarf can fix it. All this while dragging out the playtime with linear climbing sections, which is not gameplay. It is just pushing forward and looking for a contextual button prompt. By the way, on this note, QuickTime events are not gameplay either, especially when they are unfailable and without consequence. I'm pretty sure he's faking here. Also, this one was especially immersive. Press F to pay respects. This leads me to my major issue. At least 70% of this game is a glorified walking simulator. During this walking simulator, we spent hours on end while Kratos' entourage has gathered through the last game spouts exposition and side stories at you. When the hell was the notion show it don't tell it lost on these AAA game writers? We have beautiful environments, but they hardly tell a story. Instead, some of the crucial story meetings are set in rather underwhelming environments. Like the Lady of the Lake just takes place in low visibility Subnautica, or a meeting with the Norns of Fate that looks like the entrance to a Middle Eastern carpet shop. Or why tell us that Nidhogg, mother of dragons, chews at the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil and then have us fight it in a generic forest? A pretty forest, but still generic. Why not place the fight at the roots of bloody Yggdrasil where the fucker is supposed to be? It even has a portal ability, so it could easily bring you there. This can be compared to the first game, where there's a lot of talk about the giant Famur. And later in the game you get to climb his frozen corpse, merging narrative and visuals nicely. Moving on to other problems. Kratos' emotional support group is one of the most infuriating deviations from sensible writing, where it is not actual dialogue but just people vomiting out whatever comes to their tiny mind without any sort of filter. Much like making a YouTube review, actually.
We need to work our way up. This way.
This is not normal dialogue, it's a symptom of ADD. This terrible filler writing ensures that I lose all empathy for these characters, which I may have had. Furthermore, for some reason it seems that all these factors need equal billing on the script, making sure to spend way too much time on their backstories, whereas Kratos, the actual main character, basically just wallops about what happened in previous games. This means Kratos' Semen Demon has a much larger focus, but they forgot to make him any kind of likable, and instead we just have to work with an annoying teenage brat with the mind of a 3-year-old. This all makes Ragnarök feel unlike the chapter in an epic saga, but instead a filler episode in a mediocre padded TV series. These brain-dead morons really come into their own when we finally get a break in the walking simulator with all of the puzzles, which is also normally part of a walking simulator. I say that like there are many puzzles, but in fact there are about 3 types of puzzles repeated ad nauseum. You will go into a room, and if you look around for more than a nanosecond, the support constables not only draw attention to the puzzle, but directly tell you the solution.
Maybe we can use the big crate.
Sometimes they will even spout the solution to the puzzle while you are solving it. This seems to be an ongoing trend that you're not allowed to have any independent thought and need to be handheld through the entire ordeal in case you got scared and stopped looking at the pretty environments for a second. Also, if you try to deviate from the handholding by exploring a bit, you will be incessantly reminded that you're straying from the path and told with a tongue-in-cheek attitude that you're doing something weird, like looking for a chest or loot. Sometimes after a major plot mission, the game will present an open area for questing, where your leash will be taken off and you're allowed to roam around and get some air, and once you tire yourself out like a good little puppy, the leash is reattached and we can continue. Not exactly interwoven with the rest of the game. If the end of the plot mission does not contain a field for you to frolic in, one of your little ass elves will remind you that you're now free to walk around since we unlocked the frosting power, which can open the muffin doors or whatever. Or maybe you want to upgrade your equipment. This is blurted out in a least subtle way, and by hearing this crappy dialogue for the umpteenth time, it starts to feel like something is scratching the inside of your skull. They also ensure that the tone of the game is all over the place, having them divided into 2. One half being depressed and moody characters driving a serious narrative, and the other half being, in quotation marks, funny characters jaja-bingsing it up.
Well, happy Ragnarök, everybody! Let's drink.
The disjointed and padded storytelling is extremely unfortunate, since the overall narrative is great with both heartbreaking and warming moments. Another positive note on the story is the overall handling of Norse mythology. Of course, massive liberties are taken with the source material, but they managed to intertwine the established God of War story with the mythological tales quite well. This is especially impressive when they start to capitalize on existing unclarities between the relations of the roles Fenrir and Garm to interwove the 2 narratives. Nice job! With exception of the whole Loki and mask thing. I'm pretty sure that was a Jim Carrey movie. You may have noticed that I've avoided talking about the combat until now. Well, we saved the big one for the end. All core mechanics have been copy-pasted, however, some major cancerous balls have emerged on the system. A few new enemies have appeared, they are completely underwhelming, and the main enemy in the first part of the game is a lizard. And no, not some sort of mutated Komodo dragon or lizard man. Nope, just a small lizard the size of a bearded dragon. Also, I don't remember enemies being this freaking tanky. It feels like you're chipping away at the health bars, and enemies hardly recoil from being hit by the freaking God of War. Kratos, however, does stagger heavily from any minor fairy fart, making him feel like a frail old man swinging around 2 wet tea towels and a toothpick. This feeling is further amplified when we get strong-armed into playing as his threat of a son who whacks at enemy with an actual toothpick. And this does exactly as much damage as our senile old main character. Generally, the strength of the brat is wildly inconsistent throughout the story. Sometimes he needs Aiden to move blocks that other gods would use as dice, and the next minute he's holding back Thor's daughter in full charge with a single hand. Next on the chopping block. Almost every fight is an arena fight with continuously spawning enemies. Normally this wouldn't be too bad, but since they had lost the camera of Kratos' rectum, you have no overview of the battlefield and get blindsided constantly, especially when new bastards are constantly appearing out of thin air. Enemies even capitalize on this by having a quick sideways dodge move that is too fast for the lock-on camera, leaving your field of vision, making you unsure if the lock-on is disengaged or not. To combat the blindsiding, the people of the Nine Realms have evolved a special kind of hemorrhoid that glows bright red right before getting anally assaulted by Asgard's consort. That is at least the only explanation I can find for the obnoxious glowing arrows you need to keep a constant eye on. Addition of these arrows just proved that the developers were aware of the issue but felt presentation was more important than actual good gameplay. Much of this was already a problem in the previous release, but when you recycle a game as much has been done here, minor annoyances become massive. Furthermore, a solution for something like this is simple. Bayonetta 1 had a system where enemies would only attack when they were within your field of vision. If you want to rip off a better combat system, at least do something like this, unlike the following. The color-coded attacks. What in Odin's holy tits is this shit? You have yellow attacks that must be parried, red attacks that must be dodged, blue that must be interrupted, and I think some of them are green, but I think I just parried those. The red attacks are especially a galaxy brain move when the enemy is on fire. This is something I've seen in several games lately, and I believe it kinda stems from Sekiro, the game AAA is currently attempting to rip off. Sekiro is based on parries, but sometimes a danger sign will appear telling you that the next move is not parryable. And this is where AAA copycats always drop the ball when they're ripping off a better system. They don't pay attention to why it works. The idea of this warning is to make you gauge the enemy's movement and act accordingly. In the case of Sekiro, this being jumping or dodging, leaving you always carefully watching the enemy and deciphering if he's doing a thrust or sweep attack. In God of War, you just respond to the color coding with no regard for the actual attack. But if you find colors to be a little too challenging, don't you worry. Your emotional support group has your back and will constantly yell useful information like use your shield or you are on fire, or even warning you about an attack coming from the back. This is usually when the axe of said attack is buried deeply in your backside.
Incoming back here!
What happened to gameplay with more complexity than a bloody speaking spell? Maybe we can just evolve the entire gaming industry to using a controller with only 4 big colored buttons that you press when you're told, and 1 giant panic button to smash in case you start feeling a stray independent thought. It would certainly ease the inevitable Guitar Hero controller challenge runs. The game is not bad. It is beautifully crafted with a fantastic, albeit padded story. It is however dragged down massively by prioritization of visuals and presentation over actual engaging gameplay. Something which is further highlighted by the massive amount of recycled content. Personally, I prefer gameplay and immersion to take the front seat instead of being dragged through a tightly scripted interactive movie, no matter how good that movie might be. Game of the year, my ass.